All right, folks, we're just about ready to go live here. Hey, everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod, live here to talk about MSU's last true road game of the season in Iowa City against the Iowa Hawkeyes. Before we begin talking about MSU's win 91-84 over Iowa, a quick word of thanks to Sparty Cat for joining our other paid supporters on Substack. So thanks a lot, Sparty Cat. Sparty Cat joins Rich Wagenheim, Kenneth Cremett, Roger Bronsick, L, Michael Emmerich, and Joe in VT on Substack. Also, thanks to all the Patreon and supporters at the Scott Skiles level and Mateen Cleve supporters, Bill Church, Brian O'Donnell, Michael Bosnick, Chad Hickey, Mike Huntoon, and Scott Driscoll. And at the Draymond Green level, Adam Walzak, Dan Rankin, and Doug Robinson, David Brame, Jim L., James Benton, Paul Marsh, and Doug Robinson. And to find links, head on over to our support page if you want to support the show. We really appreciate it at www.tffinots.com/support. Okay, so I'm actually going to read what I wrote at the 12-minute mark of the game for my open for the show. uh, we talked about what MSU would have to do to lose this game, and just about everything we said happened. They didn't dominate one of the worst rebounding teams in the country. They failed to get much of anything in transition, and they are once again struggling at the free throw line and getting to the rim. They couldn't hit free throws, like a trend that's been present for the last 5 games and during the winning streak, but it hadn't really cost them until today. So now the Spartans will have to return to East Lansing and beat Michigan to win an outright Big Ten title. So scratch all that. So to rehash it, I guess now we'll say to restart. Despite being down 10 at the 12-13 mark, 58-48, Michigan State went on a 43-26 run to finish the game. They did it by reversing their early deficiencies in getting stops and rebounds and getting some steals and work done in transition. They also got much better looks and rhythm from three, which helped spur things along. So now the Spartans returned to East Lansing as outright Big Ten champions with a chance to do a victory lap against hated rival Michigan on senior day. I was thinking at that game about the 12-minute mark. The first thing you're going to say is disgraceful. And fortunately, we didn't have to hear that as the first thing you talk about with the game.
Well, the only thing I would say is this. I wasn't where you were. As angry and disappointed as I wasn't where you were. And the reason I wasn't where, well, two reasons. Iowa's Iowa.
It's true.
I mean, that's reality.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And Michigan State's Michigan State, by which I mean, how many times have we seen this? It is not an accident that they just blitz teams, run roughshod over them late in games. And we hadn't yet hit, about the 10-minute mark or so, give or take a minute,
Yeah.
is about where you start seeing that. Look, I don't know how Fran McCaffrey's going to feel about it, but in my mind, that was a huge factor because to me, it looked like Michigan State still had energy and Iowa didn't. You want to know why Iowa had to foul so much? They didn't have the energy to guard anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
That's why rebounding improved. That's why a lot of things improved. And so you can't, especially not against a good team. If it was a good opponent, okay, it's a little more dire to be down double digits with 12 minutes left. Against Iowa, no. Now I understand. I would guess part of your thinking was they haven't even gotten anything from Sanford and Dix, and those guys are due. But those
Right.
guys haven't been playing well recently, as they showed, at least scoring wise. And they never really showed up, not in a major way. I think that was the remarkable thing is that Iowa was able to have the lead for so much of that game without those guys playing well. Now, look, we don't sugarcoat things here. And by no means am I going to say that I thought that this was a vintage or even solid performance by Michigan State. It for a large portion of that game, it was very disappointing, both ends. I thought uh, the trouble they had defending screen action, be it slip screens
Oh,
or
that was
flare
rough.
screens, was awful. It looked like Indiana, or maybe more to the point, it looked like the first Illinois game
Yeah,
all
yeah, yeah.
over again.
Exactly. Yeah.
Except you weren't executing at the offensive end. because once again, you were struggling with dissecting the zone. That all changed. I would say offensively, it changed pretty much right from the break in the second half. They didn't start getting stops until the last 10 minutes or so.
Right. Yeah, that's
But
true.
offensively, they were really good. You don't score 61 points and a half in. Now, I know you said that 40 some of those came in the last 12 minutes, but that still means they were on a pretty good pace for the first 8 minutes
Yeah,
of
they're
that
just
half. So
trading baskets. Yeah.
they figured, right, exactly. They just couldn't get stops to cut into the lead. And then once they started doing that, it was game over. Uh, I, uh, I obviously guys hit shots. They hit open shots. That was important. But I really want to give credit to Jeremy Fears because I think then look,
Yes.
we'll talk about Jace Richardson, and he was immense. But I think in terms of really starting to break that zone down, in my opinion, I'll be interested to hear what Tom Izzo has to say. I thought he was a key because he started to get penetration into the heart of that thing that I really think broke them down, and they had to go away from it. They were very
Mhm.
content. Once they first went to the zone in the first half, I think they stayed in it the whole rest of the half. It was probably the last 15 minutes or so of the first half that we saw them sit in a 2-3 zone. And why not? You know,
Yeah.
when they're struggling against it, when Michigan State just can't get it was the same old shit against that zone. The ball wasn't moving, it was sticking, it wasn't moving side to side with any kind of pace. And as partially as a result of that, they weren't able to get the ball into the middle. You don't force the defense to collapse. So oftentimes, the best look you get is a quote unquote open three that really isn't very open
Right. Out of rhythm.
because it's out of rhythm. The shot window's not what you want it to be. Yeah, it's not good. It's not the way you want to play offensively. So the second half, that changed because of a lot of guys, but I start with Jeremy. I thought Jeremy had a really good game. Really good game. Maybe the best game he's had in several weeks because he
I
showed
agree.
up defensively, which he usually does, but he was really impactful in that way in this game. And then I think he just kept the pressure on and was also, as I say, the key, in my opinion, to starting the process of breaking that zone down. And then after that, you started to see other guys get in the act. So big from him. Huge game, obviously, once again from Jace Richardson, where nobody can be surprised at this point. He is probably single handedly responsible for keeping them in touch in the first
Y-
half. Without
yes.
him, God knows where they would have been. They were down 7 with him, scoring 12 points. So where they would have been without him, who knows? And then he kind of kept it up. What did he end up with? He ended up
I was just
with
trying to figure that out.
21, right? I think it was
22
21.
points. Yeah, he had a free throw
22.
at the end. 7
Okay.
for 13 from the field, 2 for 6 from 3. Actually, really poor from the line. 6 for 9 for him. Really struggled there, but and 4 rebounds.
Yeah,
Couple
well,
assists.
we'll talk about the free throws, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, big game, and he did it, the same way we've seen him lately. It was a variety of things. He hit some threes. He went only 2 for 6. Got himself to the line. He wasn't quite as good there as we'd like, but he got himself there. And then, of course, his ability to just get to the rim was impressive and finish. And then he had 2 putbacks
On his
on
own
offensive
misses.
rebounds, which I thought were his own misses, right? Which were big. So huge game from him. It's funny because if you would have thought at halftime, oh yeah, Michigan State's going to have what was it? One, two, three, four, 5 guys in double digits and a sixth, Cohen Carr, knocking on the door with 8. You never would have believed that, right?
No.
But they did it, and they did it in a variety of ways. Guys did just enough to put themselves in a position where they could help this team. Jaden Akins was pretty much a 0 first half. Big impact in the second. Big impact. Um, Trey Holloman didn't do a lot in the first half. Big impact in the second half. Uh, they got Jackson Kohler somehow in a game that I didn't think he was great, had 15 points. We mentioned Jeremy, 14 points, really strong game from him. And yeah, that covers the double digit guys. And I also think, just to wrap up the individuals, uh, Cohen Carr only had, what do you have, 8 points and 5 boards, but
Oh. He was
I thought that
impactful.
was
Yeah.
an impactful game from him, particularly the second half. There were segments where he just kind of took it over at both ends. Had a couple of huge blocks. I thought played great defense in general. He was not one of the guys I was unhappy with in the first half. It was pretty much everybody else. And then in the second half, he started making loud defensive plays, and it just seemed like every bucket he had, all four of them, as is usually the case, was big for momentum. You know, those dunks, huge every time he has them. He had the one play where he took the ball off the dribble and is going to get me going. Should have had an and one, didn't get the
Oh,
ball, but muscled it in. That was a huge shot. Um, and now that it did get me going, that was without a doubt in my mind. Others may differ, but that was the single worst officiated game we've seen this year, bar none.
yeah.
Awful, horrendous. You can't miss as many calls at the rim as they did, both ways. Plays where Michigan State gets called for a foul where it's a clean block. I had at least three of them. And at the other end, when Michigan State is taking the ball to the rim, there's contact and there's no call. And
Oh,
we all
wait, Carr got mugged. I mean, that one
oh,
dunk.
oh that and it just on and on and on. There were so many I lost count. Um, I understand that you're on the road in the Big Ten and you expect some of that. And an Iowa fan will point out and say, well, Michigan State was in the 1-1 in the second half with whatever it was, 11 minutes to go or something. Well, yeah, you know why? Because Iowa had to resort to mugging because they didn't have enough energy to defend, to guard anybody. It was deserved, believe me, and they should have been there earlier. It was, yeah, that look, Michigan State struggling the way they did is not attributable mostly to that. That was bad basketball at both ends by Michigan State that put them in the hole that they were in. I'm just saying, objectively, awful game. Those guys should not get tournament assignments. They shouldn't. I mean,
Yeah.
when you call a game that poorly, you shouldn't get the rewards. You know, and these were easy calls. These weren't hard calls. These weren't bang bang. They were easy and obvious, and they couldn't get it right repeatedly. So anyway, enough preaching.
Yeah. Well, and the interesting, we always talk about Michigan State wearing teams down, and Iowa plays a lot of guys, and so you can sit there and say, well, there were they have plenty of reserves. It's not like this is a team that's not deep. I mean, their quality depth is not certainly not what Michigan State's quality is. However, then I look at the minutes, and actually you got Peyton Sanford and
Yeah.
Dix both playing 35 plus
Yep.
minutes. Belwell
That's
played
it.
almost 30. Price Sanford played 30. And so then, yeah, they played more guys, but in some ways they weren't, they didn't play a lot.
Well, and
So
that's one part of it. But here's the second part, and that's important. That their three best offensive players tonight, in my
yeah.
opinion, all played 30 minutes plus. But here's the other thing: Michigan State plays 10 guys, and they can all play.
Yeah.
Iowa
Oh, yeah.
can't
Yeah.
say that.
Yeah.
And they got some production out of guys you don't expect to see it come from at times tonight. But although I will say, I think we were prescient on Evan Braun
Hmm.
because he really did damage in the first half. But that's the thing. I talk about this in different contexts over the years a lot. The law of diminishing returns, right? So with guys like that, it tends to be the case that the more minutes you play them, the less you're going to get out of them. Like you might get a good half out of guys like that, but by and large, over the course of the game, water's going to find its level.
Right.
And so I think that's the other thing too. The bind that Michigan State puts you in is if you want to try to keep guys fresh, what it's going to mean is you're probably going to have to take your best players off the floor more than you want to in favor of guys you don't want to play. You
Right.
know what I mean? So it really does put you in a bind. And I think that's part of what we saw tonight.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was that, and I think just Michigan State's approach changed in the second half too. I mean, they got baited into a lot of threes and just kind of like just bad offense. And I don't think it was even predicated so much on the zone as just kind of like this that stale, stagnant thing, movement that they. It felt like the Indiana game that first half, and
Very much so. Very
and
much so.
and that was and that is somewhat the fact that I guess I was fresh, but it's also just that's just Michigan State letting Iowa impose their will. The fact that I was rebounding as well as they were was ridiculous. This is a team that
Yeah.
I mean I've watched every game. I've never seen Iowa rebound so well, and now they ultimately lost the rebounding battle. But I mean that was really unprecedented. So
Well, I will tell you my little theory on the first half and Michigan State's inability to get offensive rebounds. I think that they shot 16 threes in the
well yeah
first half. And when you are shooting threes at that kind of clip, which is not normal for them, that's pretty close to a game average normally for them. When you're shooting them at that kind of rate, it's going to be dicey
hmm
with the offensive rebounding, right?
yeah
Because you got long rebounds. And you could watch that guy. I didn't think Iowa was. There were a few instances where I'd say, okay, give Iowa credit on the defensive boards, but most of it was just took a long bounce right to an Iowa player. But that's part of the risk you take when you're putting up so many of those shots. And of course, you're missing as many as Michigan State was. So I do think that shot selection in a kind of diffuse way played into that a little bit. But I'm with you. I mean, we'll come back to it because we're going to
yeah
talk
right
about the keys. But I'm with you. That was not. Yeah, they were using a line on the broadcast which was absolutely correct for large portions of that game. Michigan State and Iowa basically had the scripts flipped.
yeah
And that's not how you can live. Tom Izzo said it in his post game. He said they had to get back to being who they are. Well, they did that in time to get a win, but for large portions of that game, they did not do the things like rebounding, like getting out in transition and finishing, um, like getting to the free throw line. Now they ended up shooting a boatload of free throws, but for 3 quarters of that game, they were way below pace in terms of attempts. And then it changed because Iowa could no longer defend without hacking. But yeah, just a lot of things you don't expect. The defense for the first half, basically the first 30 minutes, not Michigan State caliber defense at all.
right
And so when the script flipped, that was it because Iowa's Iowa.
yeah
But
and yeah
yeah, and I just wanted one more comment on just the game itself. I said it to you when we first got on. Playing this team, especially in that building, but really anywhere, and I've felt this way for a long time. It's just like pulling teeth. It's not enjoyable. I mean, they just clinched an outright Big Ten title, and I'm thrilled about that. But it was mostly a frustrating experience watching that. And part of it is that you're playing that team and the way they play, and then the way that the last 4 minutes you just knew they were going to extend the game and drag it out and hit enough prayers that they were going to have a hope to be in it, so they'd continue to drag it out. And Michigan State wasn't even that bad down the stretch. But
no
I know probably everybody listening to this at certain points in those last 4 minutes,
flashbacks
flashbacks, yeah.
yeah
And it didn't happen. And that's a credit to Michigan State finally starting to hit some free throws. That was important.
hmm
And absent one horrendous decision by Jaden Akins to try and dunk a ball,
yeah
they handled the pressure pretty damn well also. And I thought were very smart the way they played it. But again, Iowa is going to hit just enough prayers that they're going to stay in it. They're going to keep fouling. It's going to take 30 minutes to play the last 2 minutes of the game. And it's not like they're exceptional in that other than the making prayer shots bit. Everybody plays that way, but it just seems to happen with them a lot. If this is it for Fran, which as we talked about the other night, I'm not convinced is the case, but if it
and I am
is,
still
good riddance. See you later. I'm ready for somebody else.
yeah I would a couple comments. One is it's nice to see them for the first time. I feel like maybe the season, or they don't attack the press like I'd expect this team to attack the press, and they really did with Iowa. And they got a lot of stuff going in the second
Eventually,
half.
eventually
Yeah,
they yes. I thought in the first half it was way too much survive it when Iowa played it.
Yeah. Well, and Iowa will play. They'll kind of throw the press out there if for momentum reasons. I mean, that's kind of how
Yes,
I feel like it.
yes.
And that's where it was great because it just basically killed the momentum. It gave an easy basket on the other end, and so that was nice that they attacked that. And I feel like a lot of times they just survive it, even when they're playing other teams too. So it was nice to see that. One of listeners here, DM, just was also mentioning it's probably worth talking about just briefly. So there was that strange, well, where Trey just got wiped out on that screen in the second half,
Yep.
and then he started jawing back and forth with uh,
Harding.
Harding. Yeah, I mean it's pretty clear that he said, my
Yep.
friend of mine here, right? What he said on TV.
Yep.
Trey is a guy who is not bothered by the situation. I mean, I think he plays a little too casual sometimes, and that may be his undoing at times. But he's not a guy who backs down, and he always seemed like when we had him on the show, very mild mannered, very quiet kind of
Sure.
kid. But he's just like that classic player, where like a football player, where they're just really like kind of meek, and then they get in the field, they're just like an animal. I feel Trey is that way, and although I don't think you saw a turnaround right at that point, but that seemed like that was sort of a turning point of sorts, at least of momentum in the game. It certainly turned the crowd against Michigan State, but it didn't seem to bother Michigan State.
No, not absolutely, and that is an important play to call out. I think it was a bad idea on Iowa's part. I mean, one thing is the call, and Trey. My assumption is Trey was frustrated with contact he thought he wasn't getting the benefit of. He
Hmm.
and others in that game, and so they finally call one, and he was applauding very demonstratively, and then I'm assuming Harding said something to him. Bad idea. He's and that would go for this team in general. They're not going to remind anybody of the Cleves era in that way, where God help anybody who tried to go at those guys verbally. But they're in their own way. I would bet on them having good responses to that kind of stuff. And I think they were also just getting tired of getting hacked. The second half was I don't know how many fouls Iowa had in the second half, but it had to be a boatload.
Probably 15 or so, something like
Oh
that.
yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if it was up there because they were in MSU was in the bonus with more than double-digit minutes left to play. I know that.
Right.
So yeah, just bad idea, Brock Harding. Maybe you'll learn something from that. Don't
18
talk
fouls in the second half. 18.
18. And seriously, I would
Could have been
say
more. Yeah.
the vast majority were not at garbage time. They weren't doing. I'm trying to think. How many fouls did they have? Any fouls where it was just obviously looking to stop the clock?
Well, maybe when Carson caught that really deep pass. I
That
mean,
one,
but
that one. Not many of those 18. I would say at least 15 or 16 of those were legit.
yeah.
That's just yeah, and so I think that was probably part of it too. Iowa had been credit to them in a way because the last thing we associate with that program is physicality. That's just
Hmm.
not their MO. But they were really trying to be physical in this game. And I think in the end it maybe backfired a little bit. They had guys in foul trouble. They're
Yeah.
big men. They had a real problem with that late in the game. And that should be mentioned too. I think that also had something to do with Michigan State starting to find more success because they were able to get plays at the rim and finish them a little more easily. Not that Iowa has great rim protectors in there, but the guys they had in there had to be careful, you know.
Right.
So yeah, but important point to bring that play up because that was a bad idea by Iowa. And it did kind of correspond. I don't remember what the exact score was at that moment. I think Michigan State's comeback was already underway.
Yeah, but they might have been like seven or something. They were kind of
Maybe,
like they're
maybe. Yeah.
wavering back and forth from seven, and then I think it
Might have
went back to
been.
10, and then after
Yep.
that, I think that's when they really sort of pulled it away.
Yeah, might have been. So yeah, we might. I guess I have to verify what the score was, but if it was when the margin was that big, then absolutely. Because I know this after that play, it was a wipeout.
Yeah. Well, it was a weird game in the sense from our family standpoint. It's the first time we've had an Iowa Michigan State game where my wife has soundly been cheering for Michigan State. There there are times when she sort of not sure
Why
who
is
she'll
that?
cheer for. Well, because the game was actually took completely meaningless for Iowa. The
Right.
scenario, it's very interesting because with all the tiebreakers, had Iowa won this game, they'd be 7-12 as opposed to 6-13. But still, they would still need to beat Nebraska because of all the tiebreakers, unless a lot of unlikely scenarios would occur, like they won at Nebraska, obviously. But so really, they make the tournament where it comes down to Sunday playing Nebraska either way.
That's the
So
game
what?
that
So
matters. Yeah.
this game really, in some ways, didn't matter, which is kind of weird. I mean, so she was very frustrated by that. She doesn't want to have any stress at the Michigan State game on Sunday, and uh, and so anyway, so it was really bothering for her. Like she's like, finally, why didn't this team play like this against Northwestern? They went to
Yeah.
Northwestern. They were just terrible. They
Yeah.
got, I mean, murdered everywhere on every part of the facet of the game. And yet this game, they sort of come out and play sort of tough. And so anyway, it all ended up working out, I guess. But it was strange. It was kind of weird for us because I get it. Like, I'll have a game. There'll be a game where say I was having a really good season in football. Michigan State's, I don't know, 3-8 or something like that, and they play, and I'm like, yeah, I don't really care that much. I'm just happy for Iowa because Michigan State's season's not going anywhere or something like that. But still, you end up rooting for Michigan State. You can't help it. And so I fully expected her to still end up cheering for Iowa, but she was really truly frustrated
Well, good for
by
her.
Iowa.
I can. Well, I don't have a second team. I mean, I for
Yes, I
my
get it.
unlike you, for my graduate school experience, I went to a school that has no athletics at all.
Right?
Standalone law school. So I don't have and even if they had, trust me, I wouldn't have been rooting for them. But, but uh,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Well,
I don't have that feeling. But even I can't imagine doing that. So that's very magnanimous on her part.
yeah. Well, and for her
I
family,
guess
it's
she's got
always
a
more.
child at Michigan State too now, right? So
She
that
does, and she
changes
has a
the
child at
dynamic.
Purdue. So, there's all kinds of weird. Although I don't know. I don't know that I'd care that much for my kid. If my kid was on the team, I'd absolutely change how I'm
Yeah,
cheering. There's no question. But just
yeah.
because my kid's at that school, I don't know that I'd care that much, to be honest. I mean,
I'm with you. I
unless
mean,
they're like invested, maybe if they're on the
yeah,
marching. I'm trying to imagine like some scenario where they're not on the team, but maybe they're like
right.
invested in the success of the school. I guess you can kind of make an argument for it. I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
not in that situation, so you know, I don't. The fact that my daughter's in the linguistics program at Michigan State doesn't make me think, and I'm a big Spartan fan.
right,
So anyway,
right.
all right. Well, let's move. Let's move on and talk about the player that needs to be kept in the gutter by Michigan State. Brought to you by the Brothers Who Just Do Gutters. Folks, that's all they do. It is that season. It is spring. It is time to start making sure that all your gutters are functioning properly, whether it's your house, your business, maybe you got some apartment buildings, whatever it is, whether you're on the east side or the west side of the state, the Brothers Who Just Do Gutters can come out and take care of that for you. They took care of my house. I no longer have to stain my door every year. I actually have gutters that are functioning, and I have leaf guards in, so I don't have to clean the stupid things out. So, and I, for the most part, stay off ladders. So, have them come on and do all that stuff for you. The nice thing is, as a listener of the show, you get 10% off if you mention Final Four when you get your estimate. And how do you get your estimates? Where you get all the other information. Head to our support page at the Final Four is on the schedule.com/support. All right. So the player that Michigan State had to keep in the gutter was Peyton Sanford. And Peyton had a game where, again, like most of the players, Michigan State, we kind of listed the gutter. Inefficient day. He's 4-12 from the field, 1-for-5 from three, 6-for-6 from the line, 15 points, had 7 rebounds, one of them offensive, an assist, 2 turnovers, no steals, no blocks. He had one really good look that I was surprised he missed. But he had the other one where he caught it out of bounds, and that is something that I don't know that I've ever seen him do. I know we see other teams do that, and I think it just kind of reflected the frustration he probably had that he's just
Yeah,
working so hard to get anything. And so they did a really good job at him and Dix for the most part until garbage time, when they got some buckets. So kudos to Michigan State. I mean, I think they kept him in the gutter even though he still finished with 15 points. I mean, he played what,
absolutely.
38 minutes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Look, it was an inefficient game, and the biggest thing, as we know with Sanford, is the threes, right? That's where he can just kill you. If he and by the way, 4 of his 6 points at the line shouldn't have happened because they both came on
Those,
obviously clean blocks
yeah, I
that
know.
were gifts to him. So it was his performance was even worse than it looks. Yeah, he was in the gutter. And he said, well, he had 15 points. Yeah, but it's an inefficient 15. And he wasn't allowed to do the things that you figured he would have to do. If you thought about, well, what's the path to an Iowa win? In my mind, at least, part of it absolutely would have been Peyton Sandfort goes on a streak at some point in the game where he's just killing you from three.
Right. He can
Like
heat up
that's
in seconds. Yes, for
yeah.
sure.
And I know he hasn't been as efficient with the 3-point shot this year as at some other points in his career, but we know what he is. He's just he's a guy who can bust, three triples on you in the space of 60 seconds. And the fact that he only went 1 for 5, frankly, the fact that he only got 5 off is a sign. I think the difference for Michigan State in the second half was, and I don't know how many prayers they hit late, which inflated their 3-point number is not reflective of the way they shot for the game.
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
thought Michigan State did a really good job guarding and taking away threes. And a big part of that was the job they did on Sanford.
Yep. All right. So let's talk about the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids and who cleans the glass best for Michigan State. Swedish Squad of Grand Rapids, they will take care of your glass. They can also wash your house, do some house washing. And the nice thing is they can get up on the ladder. They do a nice soft scrub so they don't mess anything up when they're up there. They're not like shooting from 40 feet away. They're out right now, even in this weather. It's a good time to start taking care of that stuff before spring hits, before you get busy for summer. And the nice thing is, as a listener of the show, you get 15% off. So just contact the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. And even if you don't live in Grand Rapids, but you're Grand Rapids adjacent, give them a call. It doesn't cost you anything to get a free estimate. And more than likely than not, if you're in the Grand Rapids area, they're going to be able to take care of you. So head on over to our support page at the Final Fours on the schedule.com/support. I mean, these guys are so good. They were hired by the state capitol, or I should say by the state government, to take care of the windows in the state capitol. So they can do any job, big or small, obviously. So have them come out and check out your place. And again, they can do the interior, the outside, whatever you need to be done, they can do it. This competition is really not even close. It just keeps getting worse now for me. When I get to pick first, Kohler has a game where he's not rebounding much. And it's interesting because, I had Kohler, who ended up with 4 rebounds, I think.
No, he had
Cooper.
6.
Oh, he had 6. Yeah. He had 6. He had 6. Cooper had almost no rebounds until the very last, I don't know,
Right.
2 minutes when Kohler went out of the game. And so
I
then he,
thought that was, I want to stop you for just a second. I thought that was an interesting choice. I doubt he gets asked about it, but and Coop missed a couple free throws down the stretch too. He
yep.
only went 2 for 4, but I thought that was an interesting choice. I'm gonna guess the reason he was in the game was Izzo liked him defensively against threes. He liked
Yeah.
his ability to extend defense, not give up open looks from three, but and still wanted somebody in there to give him a rebounding presence. That's my assumption, but I did think that was an interesting choice.
Yeah. Well, either way, he finishes with 4. You also had Carr, who had 5. I had Akins, who had 2. So you win 9-8.
15-9, right?
15-9.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right?
yeah. For this. No, you're up 16-9 now. You're talking about
16 to
the
9.
overall
Wow.
score.
I
Yeah.
forgot one. Okay.
Yeah. I know. You're so far ahead.
Huh.
You've leaving points on the board. Yeah. Yeah. So,
We are really, boy, if I can rack up another couple, I might have hit the magic number, even if they go all the way to the NCAA
yeah,
tournament final.
it's unfortunate for you that you did not realize that we have a second season we start
We got
when it
10
gets to the
games
postseason.
left, maximum.
When it gets to the postseason, it starts over from zeros. I know
Oh,
you
no,
didn't
no, I
realize that.
don't think so.
I got a call from Troy at Squeeze Squad. He wants it to be a close competition. So I
I
guess you're
don't
out of
think
luck.
so.
So you gotta, yeah.
I don't think that's the way it works.
We'll have to look at subsection 3.
I'm like Bob Knight and Gene Cady and Clem Haskins when they were presented with the idea of a Big Ten tournament, and they told Tom Izzo he was going to vote against it. That's where I'm at.
All right, moving on to Nudge Printing 5 Keys to the Game. And so Nudge Printing is the longest sponsor of the show. You can see if you're watching TV, my really cool Final Fours on the schedule hoodie. We are going to have these in a couple weeks. So if you want to get your
Great.
cool shirts, t-shirts, mugs, hats, I don't know, quarter zips, all that kind of stuff, we're going to have them available. I need to get Gabe to make one that's reverse, that's white with a green logo, so I can go for the whiteouts because I really have like nothing except I got is like a really light gray. So our family loves it. My wife's that's what she wore today. She wore her Michigan State mom sweatshirt that she got from Nudge. So that was her contribution to Michigan State today. She wore green today, which was that alone was kind of amazing. But then she took that off and she put on the sweatshirt. So she was fully committed and fully invested in Michigan State today. Um, so head on over to Nudge Printing. Tons of stuff for Michigan State apparel, obviously. They're going to have, and someone on here, Big Sus, etc., asked if Nudge will have the Big Ten Champs merchandise. I almost guarantee they will. They already have some hockey Big Ten Championship merchandise,
Oh yeah,
so I
that's a
can't
pretty good
imagine.
indicator then. Yeah.
I can't imagine they're not going to have the basketball stuff. So just keep checking daily. Heck, it'll probably be there tomorrow. I mean, just go to nudgeprinting.com and don't forget, as a listen to the show, 20% off all that really great stuff. And again, super high quality stuff, spray printed, so it sustains and washes a lot. Yeah, just type in Final Four as one word when you go to the checkout and you get that great discount. All right, so first key to the game was focus. Can Michigan State, especially, was even more important, I guess, since or harder, I guess, to focus because they were already Big Ten champs coming in this game. We weren't sure when we did it recorded before the Michigan game
Right.
when they lost to Maryland, and so this is an opportunity to win the outright championship. You know, Tom Izzo was asked about it a number of times before, like in press conferences, and he said, you know, we won't celebrate on the floor, all these sorts of things. Like, I don't know anyone who would actually do that outside of like maybe your rival.
He said he's seen it a time or
Yeah,
two. It seems weird. I agree.
yeah. So it's not like baseball where you just got one field, you
But
can't go to. But
but you
anyway,
know what? Let's say Iowa actually won a Big Ten championship, which they haven't done since 1979. If they did it, I might expect them to do that because they don't win them.
right?
So if
Yeah,
you
right,
actually had that opportunity, those might be the situations he was talking about. I think the teams that are there with some regularity know how to act.
right. Well, yeah. So actually, a little bit more challenging for focus. I mean, obviously, the players all knew this was on the table as well, and I don't know if it was focus's problem really, but they definitely didn't look sharp. I mean, and it wasn't like pretty much everyone struggled outside of Jason. Like you mentioned, Jeremy was okay in the first half.
Yeah. Look, it's hard to know, right? It's hard to know what
Yeah, right.
the reasons were
What the
for,
problem was.
but what you can say with some confidence is that was in totality. So offense, defense, rebounding. That was probably, I think that was the worst half they've played um, in a long time. I mean, you could make the argument that being down 14 at home against Oregon was worse.
Yeah, it was a bad half. Yeah,
I can't remember what the margin was against IU at home. That was
it was like six or
not
something, but yeah,
not
yeah,
great.
yeah,
But this was just a bad because again, the opponent you're playing, not a good team, and they're also down their best player.
yeah.
So
Right.
it was just not a good half in any way. There was nothing other than Jace Richardson's play that you could point to and say, well, that's something they're doing well. I mean, nothing. So
Yeah,
is that a lack of focus? I, yeah, I don't know. The broadcast team posited the thought that maybe it was a sign of them being a little tired after this 5 game run that they've had. Eh, maybe, but I feel like they had there's well, let me back up half a second. Actually, there might be a little something to that because they had that run of 3 games in 7 days at the start of it, where they
right.
played, what was it, Illinois,
Purdue,
Purdue,
Michigan.
Michigan, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Illinois, Purdue, Michigan in 7 days, with 2 of those being on the road. So maybe, and then they had to suck it up and go to Maryland with a little more rest and home against Wisconsin. I think what they were getting at was not so much the time involved as just the level of energy and focus you've got to put forward to play in 5 games like that and win them. Which, okay, maybe it's hard to know. Was it that? Was it just not, for whatever reason, not getting emotionally up for that game the way they needed to? I do think it was a sharpness issue, but I do also think that there were signs in that game that Iowa was playing a little harder than Michigan State too in the first half, right?
I don't think, no question. I mean, I
Yeah.
haven't seen Iowa
So
play that hard in a while.
I don't know. We could speculate about the reasons why. I will say this. The telltale sign that you've got a focus problem is hemorrhaging turnovers, and they did not have that problem.
That's true.
Thankfully, only 8 on the game. That was a quietly, that was a big deal because especially in that you didn't dominate the boards the way that you expected to. If there had been a turnover differential along the lines of what you might have reasonably expected there to be, say, 4 or so, that might have been a big deal.
Yeah.
So that was the one thing that I think suggests that there was appropriate focus, but I don't know. It's hard to know. I just know I'm glad they're done with that bunch. Most likely.
And I know you don't believe it, but I think they're done with Fran McCaffrey. So, uh,
I'm
next,
okay with that. Look, I'm not. After this, it reminded me once again of how much I dislike play, and it's got nothing to do with him per se, but it's just that program and the way they play, and then they're going to throw in garbage late, so you can't relax. Even if you've got a big lead, they're going to tighten it up enough that it's going to be. It's like a trip to the dentist's office playing
well,
that. That's no fun.
I will say this though about Iowa in defending just the end of game. There have been too many teams that have just totally capitulated to Michigan State at the
For
end in this
sure,
last run.
for
That is
sure.
really embarrassing. Like Michigan just giving up, Illinois giving up, uh, who else? Wisconsin kind of just gave up surprising. Like I don't usually
I'm
when you're
not
only down
blaming.
less than 10. I'm not, yeah, I know you're not blaming them. I mean, they're actually making it difficult, but it's
Yeah.
it's weird that they're the first team to actually like really
Yes.
challenge Michigan State at the end of a game, which I don't know if these other teams just were so tired they're like, I just gotta get off the floor. I don't
It's
know.
been very strange. I'll
Yeah, it has
I'll
been
agree with that.
like you would not expect in the NCAA tournament, like a team like down 8 with
Right.
2 minutes to go, they're like, okay, I guess you
You're
guys
going to
beat us.
extend it to squeeze every last second
Right.
out of that
Your
game you
last
can.
chance of playing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
Right.
so third key to the game. Oh no, so guarding the
Second.
arc. Second key to the game is guarding the arc. So Michigan State, you know, I thought did a really good job, generally speaking, guarding the arc. Now, Iowa finishes 9 for 23 at 39%. I think they probably hit their last three, which were
Yeah.
all kind of like at the end. I
The
don't know the
garbage
exact.
number. The
Yeah, they
garbage
were.
number. Don't believe it.
Yeah, because and the one thing they did really good guarding three, especially with respect to Sanford, one of his like signature things is he's pulling when he dribbles the ball across half court or he gets it while he's 5 feet behind the line, but he's sort of like heading towards the basket and he shoots threes from out there somewhat frequently and actually makes those. And they were ready for that every time. I mean, I said Jaden Akins out way out on him because the thing is with him, I mean, Tominaga would do those same things as well. The thing with Sanford is he's not going to blow past you, and certainly Michigan's help defense. You're not worried about him getting a two off that. So you just have to kind of just make sure you're in contact way out there, and they did a good job with that. That's a scouting report sort of thing. So anyway, I think Michigan did a decent job preventing them from getting go too far, getting too many points, I guess, from three.
Yeah. I mean, so they would have been, uh,
Might have been like 6 of 20 or
it would have
something,
been, yeah,
30%.
yeah, which would have been much. Yeah. And honestly,
Yeah,
okay, they hit 39%. Who cares? When the game was there to be
yeah.
won and lost, I thought Michigan State generally did a very good job. Now, as we talked about, they paid for it some in the first half
Hmm.
as they had all kinds of problems dealing with screening action. I lost count, probably at 4 at least, slip screens where guys ended up with layups or dunks, maybe more. Might have been 5 or 6. Um, the bigs, I did not think in the first half did a great job handling that. I'm going to primarily put it on them. But
Yeah,
in general, Michigan State was just not playing connected defensive basketball in the first half. In the second half, that changed pretty dramatically. You didn't see those cuts happening anymore, leading to baskets. And, again, for the most part, Iowa was had their water shut off when it mattered.
yeah. I think you're right. I think the bigs were having a lot of problems with that. Specifically, well, everybody, I guess,
Everybody
just now
did. It wasn't
recognize that.
just one guy, it
But
was all three of them.
right, you didn't see Zapala come back, hardly play. I don't even know if he played in the second half. Maybe he started
He
a little bit,
started. He
and that
started,
was
but that
probably
was
it.
it.
I
Yep.
don't think we saw Booker again in the second half. I
We
don't
did not.
think.
We did not. No, it
So
wasn't a game for those guys. It just
yeah,
wasn't. Like at a certain point in the second, well, Christ, there were minutes they played Cohen Carr at the five to
right.
match
Yeah,
up
they're
because
both teams were
Iowa had no
small.
choice. Iowa had to go small because of foul
Right.
trouble. But it was second half. It was steady diet of Jackson and Coop, and that's because those were the two guys who you could trust to execute defensively. I think that's where it starts. It's usually where it starts for Tom Izzo.
Yeah. All right. So the third key of the game was the boards. This is something that we thought Michigan State should easily handle Iowa, who is, I think I described them as putrid, and I think that's probably pretty accurate.
Yep.
Overall rebounding, Michigan State had an edge of 36 to 35. From an offensive rebounding standpoint, they each had 10. Michigan State had a fewer field goal misses, so it was a 33% offensive rebounding rate, but Iowa with a 30.3.
Yep.
Second chance points was an edge for Michigan State 13 to 6, so they definitely got more done when they got their offensive rebounds. Two of those buckets being those Jace Richardson, where he just got his own rebound of his
Yep.
miss. I think Kohler had a couple as well. So I don't
He
know. I
did.
mean, it was pretty pathetic, I think, in what you would have expected. And I mean, if you thought had they done what we expected, or just even played average, they have another 10 points on this team probably.
Yeah, it was. Look, I mean, they had a small edge. I do think that the second chance points edge is nice. What'd you say? It was 13-6, so that's the
Yep.
final margin of victory.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's true.
but but look, we all anybody who watched that game knows that was not Michigan State basketball. And I mentioned one theory I have as to the first half struggles on the offensive end, at least. But then, and again, defensive rebounding. No excuse for letting Iowa clear 30%.
No.
They're terrible.
Yeah, they're worse than
So
terrible.
I think I think the sunny side up way to look at this thing is if you want Tom Izzo to have plenty of material to go at his guys with, so they don't get soft as we're rounding into. I mean, it helps that your last game is against Michigan, but beyond that, if you don't want there to be much of a chance to get soft, there were some good things that came out of this game from that perspective, because he's going to be able to launch on them as if it was a loss,
Right.
and they didn't have to lose. So, I know that sounds half-assed, and I admittedly it is, but I'll take what I can get after this one.
Right. At least you don't have to burn the tape like you did the last time there in Iowa City,
Right,
where they blew that
right.
crazy lead with the ultimate stare down. Fran
Oh,
McCaffrey and the
Jesus
Kelly
Christ.
Pfeiffer.
That I'll
Maybe
miss.
the ultimate Fran McCaffrey move of all time, I
If
think, was
he's
that the stare
gone,
down.
that kind of stuff I will miss.
uh, yeah. So moving on to the free throw line. Boy, I tell you what, Michigan State. Well, actually, go back to the offensive rebounds. Interesting, Iowa had 7 of their 10 offensive rebounds from the second half, which I didn't feel like, but that's what
Didn't
kept them in
feel
the game
that way,
early.
yeah.
They got them a bunch early, and that's what the few times Michigan State would get a stop, and before they really got the defense rolling. I think that's when they were happening, and then I think late in the game.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on to the free throw line, Michigan State was only 67% from the line. Another poor free throw shooting night, and people who normally make them. I mean, Fiddler
Yep.
struggled, Richardson struggled, Fears struggled. I kind of the only one who's was on was Akins and Kohler, who were good from
No, Akins
from the
was
line.
Akins was 0 for 1.
Oh, okay.
It was
So I guess
Kohler.
just
That's
Kohler
where
basically.
that's where it begins and ends. Yeah, it was weird. I mean, here's the thing.
I guess
There's
Fears is 5 of 7, so that's not
there's
too
a he
bad.
was okay. Yeah, and he was
Yeah,
really good late. His misses came early.
yeah.
He was good when they were trying to, withstand Fran ball in the end. Uh, I, I'm gonna go glass half full, and then we'll deal with glass half empty. Glass half full is they got 30 free throw attempts.
Exactly. 20
And
for
as we
30.
talked about, that wasn't really inflated by fouling, late game fouling situations that much. So that was really good. And I thought in the second half, when you did see Iowa maybe starting to show signs of fatigue, Michigan State was really, I thought, very aggressive.
Yep.
And so they earned those free throw attempts, is what I'm saying. So that's a positive. That's been something that's been missing during this 5 game streak. I think the only game that their free throw attempts were near normal, what I think was the Purdue game, and the rest. nowhere close to what they normally do, like low to mid teens in attempts. So that was really helpful to see. Now, the glass half empty is they were 20 for 30.
Yeah.
So that's not what you want to see. It wasn't an absolute disaster, and they did step up and hit free throws in late game situation, which were helpful. Carson missed a couple, but other than that, I want to say they had a streak where they hit, because it, as bad as 20 for 30 sounds, they were sub 50% for a lot of that game.
Yeah. They were like 7 for 14. And I think
They
they kind
they
of came
went on a
back.
run where I want to say they hit maybe 8 in a row
Yeah.
that got it, to semi-human. But yeah, it look, this has been 6 games now where they really haven't shot 6 in a row. Interestingly, 6 wins, but
Yeah.
several now in a row where they have not shot the way we're accustomed to seeing them shooting. And that matters. It's part of the equation we've talked about all year. If you're not going to shoot threes very well, you need to make up for that in other areas. And they have. They've made up for it with offensive rebounding. They've made up for it with transition points, and they've made up for it at the free throw line, both getting there and hitting them. So I'm going to take tonight as, say, a 33% step forward because they actually got there a lot.
Yeah.
Now the next step is get there a lot, start hitting them again. And like you say, it was guys you want there. It wasn't, Cohen Carr.
Zapala or something. Yeah. Right.
I probably would have taken Cohen Carr tonight. But it's the guys that are all high 80s guys that you expect to just nail them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Fiddler, boy, that
Yeah,
was rough.
yeah. Really strange.
Yeah. So, and the fifth and final key to the game is winning transition. Fast break points, where it was a 16-11 edge for Michigan State. They had less turnovers than Iowa, which was really unusual. We would not have
Yep.
expected that. Only 8 turnovers for Michigan State, 10 turnovers for the Hawkeyes, and points off turnovers. Michigan State had a 20-11 edge, which I
That's
think
big.
reflects transition as well. And so I think there's, well, there again is a margin that you could say that's the difference in the game. And anyway, so that was really good. It was good to see them kind of get back. You'd expected a looser game and defensively from Iowa, and we definitely got that in the second half, especially.
Yeah, I will say the one positive of that first half, the struggles against that zone, was that at least they weren't compounding it by also turning it over a ton, which
Right.
I believe was part of the problem against IU. It wasn't just that they weren't getting good looks and they weren't shooting well, it's that they were also struggling to get into it without making mistakes. I thought Michigan State, especially in the second half, in that run where they took control, I thought, Jeremy had a couple of steals that he created. Jaden had one that unfortunately he turned right back over.
Yeah.
Uh, but there was some good aggressive defense that forced mistakes. And as you say, 20-11 edge in points off turnovers, that is actually really significant. And to win the turnover battle, a pleasant surprise. That at least offsets a little bit of the disappointment with the rebounding stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I was really impressed with Michigan State with the transition game today, and that it felt like they got kind of back to where you hope they be. So
Yeah,
anyway,
I thought it was inconsistent. And as you said, there were, or we talked about, I didn't think they attacked pressure very well in the first half. It was a little better in the second half. But yeah, it's surprising. If you had told me before the game that Michigan State was going to score whatever it was, 91, I would have bet, oh, they probably got 25 off transition.
right.
So it wasn't quite what I had in mind for this game because I think Iowa's just so bad defensively that you figure, well, they're not gonna get back. Michigan State will beat the pressure several times, and next thing you know, they're gonna rain up. So 16 is. I'm glad they had an edge because, as we know, Iowa runs too. So to have a 5-point edge in transition points, that mattered, but maybe not quite what I thought it was going to be going in.
Yeah. Well, and I think the point about Jeremy playing much better, I think is part of that. So there was a point in that game where I think it was like 61-60. Michigan State was up one,
Yep.
And then it felt to me like, okay, this is gonna be a one possession game going to the end of the game. And then I don't know if I just stopped paying attention for a little bit because I looked up and like, holy cow, Michigan State's up 10 points. How did that happen? It was like 74-64, something like that.
Well, it
And
was
they had a couple steals, and I think one of was Jeremy got to steal. I think it was the part where Jeremy got a steal and just went straight down the court,
yep,
outran everybody, and went right through Josh Dix, who was there the whole time. And he just never kind of got in the
yep,
way. That was like the Jeremy we saw at the beginning of the year, and it's nice to
yes.
see that Jeremy back. And he has not been a present for a while, and so that's what I mean. That's the part that really encourages me.
Yeah, I thought he was really, Izzo thought he actually did a very good job against Wisconsin pushing tempo. And I agree. But this was even a step forward better than that. Like I said at the outset, right? I think this was Jeremy's best game in several weeks. When you take the totality of it, the things he
Mhm.
did, running the team, scoring, and the defense that he played, really impressed. And then, as you're alluding to, also kind of the game within the game, the way that he handled, say, pushing tempo, getting them where they want to be in terms of pace. That was all really, really important.
Well, Michigan State now returns back to East Lansing outright Big Ten champions. You saw a little bit of their celebration in the locker room.
Yeah,
And
let's talk about all
Victor Lab,
this
yeah,
for
it's
a minute,
11th
right?
11th Big Ten championship for Tom Izzo in his career in 30 years. So he's a little over 30%, not bad, 33%, and ties Bobby Knight and some guy from Purdue, Lambert, I think is his name, Piggy
Ward
Lambert.
Piggy Lambert, that's correct.
Yeah. Uh, so the two Indiana schools now tied by Michigan State for Big Ten championships. Obviously, you could say it's maybe harder for what Izzo's done, simply in the fact that there's a lot more parity in the league and a lot more good teams and also more teams. I mean, it's just a little, it's a little harder just with 18 certainly than there are with 10. So anyway, it's a quite an accomplishment for Izzo, and he's gotten back to kind of where people expect this program to be. If you're a Spartan fan, you kind of get used to them winning Big Ten championships. They won like three in a row for a while, and then you kind of think you're going to win every one. And they hadn't for a while, and they hadn't actually been in the mix for a couple of years. And now he's back.
I think that's the biggest thing because he'd had strings of, several years in a row where he hadn't won Big Ten championships. I mean, I want to say there was a streak between 2000 between 2001 and 2009 where he didn't win a Big Ten championship. But they had an Elite Eight and a Final Four in the middle of
Right.
that,
Yeah, you kind of forget then.
you
Yeah.
know? So that makes it a little easier to swallow. But he's had strings of time. He's won them in bunches. He had won 10 coming into this, right? So here's how it worked. He won four in a row in that Cleves Bell era, we'll call it. Three with Mateen and one after the year after he left. Then they won one for a while. Then they won two in a row with Kalen Lucas and company. So that got him to six. And then they won, there's the three in a row stretch during Cassius's era from his sophomore through his senior year. The only other one is that Draymond Green senior year team of 11 and 12. So he's tended to win them in bunches. Maybe that's a good sign for what's
Yeah.
about to come.
Maybe.
But that is kind of how it's gone. And I agree with you, but I guess I want to walk it back half a step. I think the reason that this string of what it had been, 4 straight years without one, felt the way that it did, in large part, I think, had to do with the fact that there wasn't really anything short of that one Sweet 16 run that kind of softened the blow a little bit. And on top of that, that they weren't really even competitive in the
Right.
Big Ten race in those years, right? Some of those others, like between 2001 and 2009, there were a couple of years there where they were right in the mix. The team that went to the Final Four in '05 just had the misfortune of playing with a juggernaut Illinois team, and they were right there most of the year. You know, um, you could think about like between the 12 team and the 18 team, you had the Denzel Valentine senior year group, which was
Right.
right there, and frankly, that was a scheduling title for Indiana. Michigan State was the best team that year. Uh, you had the 12-13 team, Michigan State, which was in there with Michigan and Indiana the whole way. I mean, so there were other years where they weren't winning it, where they were still in the race, right? And that's what we haven't seen the last 4 years. So I think that's the reason why it's felt the way it has. And I can understand it with some justification, because we are used to, it's what I always say about his program, at least the way I feel about it, and it kind of goes to the title of our podcast. If you're expecting Final Fours or Big Ten championships, frankly, every year, you're insane. Doesn't work that way for anybody. But what is fair to expect is that the program is relevant consistently, And I certainly would never go as far as to say they weren't relevant the last 4 years. That's bullshit. Anytime you make the NCAA tournament, you're relevant to one
Right.
extent or another, right? And that's the thing people forget. Down years at Michigan State means you make the NCAA tournament and you lose. That's a down year.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think it's fair. If they hadn't contended this year, it would have been 5 in a row where they really weren't ever in it. And I would understand people saying, "Boy, it's just not what we've been used to for the majority of his tenure." Well, now that talk is over because
Yeah.
they got another one. They got his 11th. He ties for the record, and you combine that with his setting the all-time win record in the same season, and they're up 2 games with one to play at home. They beat Michigan. They win it by 3 outright.
That's crazy.
In this era, amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember how many games Purdue won it by the last 2 years, but that was seen as a dominant team. I don't think they won it by any more than that,
Yeah, I don't remember.
And Michigan
That's
State
probably.
set to do that if they take care of business on Sunday, which they will. There's a prediction for you. They will. Um, and and I think that here's the other thing. Michigan State tonight became just the second Michigan State team. I misspoke myself earlier today on the Spartan Mag board. They became the second Michigan State team in history to win 16 games in a Big Ten season. The only other one was the 2017-2018 team.
Yeah.
But that was in
16-2.
a weaker Big Ten, frankly. Not as deep a Big Ten. That was not a great Big Ten that year. They did it in one less game, though, so fair play to them. But only second time. If they win against Michigan, they'll be the first MSU team in history to win 17 games in a season in the league. Now, again, we know most of the last, whatever, 40, 50 years, at least, it's been 18 game Big Ten schedules.
Right. Yeah.
So they have that advantage with 2 more, but I don't care. And I don't think
Yeah.
I don't think anybody else should care either. It's a hell of an accomplishment to win 17 league games, whether you're playing 18 or 20. It's impressive. Another thing, tonight ended the road schedule for MSU. They end the road 8-2. And
Crazy too.
honestly, this team should have been 10-0. You and I know that because
Yeah.
we had the misfortune of actually witnessing in person those 2 losses. They should have been 10-0. They had UCLA. I mean, they were right there with UCLA, and the
Sure.
USC game was a disgrace. So, I mean, whatever, they got it. They got it done. But that's the thing. It's not like there are any instances where you look at it and say, well, yeah, but if you say you should have won those games, what about this tight game or that tight game that you probably didn't deserve to win? Were there any of those this year, home or away? I can't think of one.
Well, people would point to Maryland because he won on a half court heave, but they were up 10
Michigan
with
State
like 2 minutes
outplayed them.
left. Yeah.
No,
No,
they
I know.
outplayed them.
That'd
No,
be the
that
only
was
one you could
one they
point to,
deserved.
really.
Yeah, I don't buy that. But anyway, look, I mean, this is all screwing around basically, but it's still. And then you think about the one home game they lost against Indiana. It's like I'm not saying I think this team should have gone 20-0 because that's just nobody does that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Auburn is supposedly a team for the ages. They're not going unbeaten through the SEC, right? So you don't do that in a high major conference the caliber of this one. But it does go to show you, and I think we might have mentioned this earlier this year. It's I'm having this sense of deja vu that we've talked about this before. But when I think about other Big Ten title teams, usually those teams, and I haven't gone through it to make sure I'm not forgetting a weird game here or there, but usually those teams had at least one like absolute stink bomb.
Yeah.
Where they just, like Cash's team going to Mackey and getting blown out, that kind of thing. This team never had that happen. The three losses they took were all in single digits. They were all games that, frankly, at the under four timeout, Michigan State was still in it. That's pretty remarkable. That's a sign. If you're looking for signs for a team that's built to really do some damage here going forward, that's a pretty good indicator that this team just doesn't go out and lay total bombs.
Yeah. Well, or also that they get down double digits
Yeah, it
and
doesn't matter.
and they just come right back or, they
Okay,
make
so
it a competitive.
6 game winning streak. Let's think about this. They were down at Illinois, right?
16. Yeah.
No, but at the half, I mean, sorry, they
Oh,
weren't
right.
down.
Yeah. Down to the half. Yep.
Down at the half at Illinois. They were up against Purdue, right? I think
Yes.
that was the case. They
Hmm.
were down at Michigan. They
Yep.
were down against Maryland, and they were
Yep.
down against Wisconsin, and they were down tonight. So I think that's 5 of these 6 they've trailed at the half.
Right where you want them to being
That's
trailing at
well,
halftime.
but again, it goes back to this depth thing that we've talked about ad nauseum, but it's worth talking about regularly. The proof is there. It's what do they do to teams in the second half? If you think it's just luck, you're out of your mind.
Yeah.
It's a reflection of something real, and we know what the something real is. Another thing tonight I want to mention, which I actually was not too optimistic about at a certain point of seeing happen. Michigan State remained unbeaten when winning the race to 69.
Right.
They got there
Yes.
on a Jaden Akins three, which took them to 70. It was during that run you had mentioned where they pushed it out. You kind of were distracted for a second and then looked back and, oh,
Just,
God, they're up 10. It was during that run.
yeah.
But it's, as I've mentioned before, it's a fun stat in a way you can't take too seriously because they've also won one game where they didn't win the race. But it also tells you what this is a team that tends to score points. The games they've lost have been games where they didn't hit 69.
Right.
So if they're at that, if they're scoring the way we expect them to score, they're probably going to win.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting because Tom Izzo, strangely, through 30 years, has only won Big Ten Coach of the Year 3 times. Maybe not strangely because when your expectations are that you're going to win it
Yeah,
all, you don't
that's
ever
it.
win.
That's it.
But I would think this year, I got to imagine he wins it at this point. You've won the Big Ten outright, and then maybe by 3 games if you win, tomorrow. If it's Sunday, if not, then you win by one
What
game. But
credible
still, they're.
argument is there for anybody else? I've heard
I
people
mean,
try to make them for Greg Gard and
Dusty May
Dusty
because they were
May.
the 3 win team last year, and now they have
Not
turned around. And I don't know. I mean, that I'm trying to make. That's the only argument I can
right.
come up with because no one else really has done anything that's that remarkable. Greg Gard is. I mean, what they're 14-6. I don't know. That's. I mean, just because you expected
That's the
Wisconsin to
best they
be
can do.
ten and
That's if
ten. I mean,
that's
whatever.
if they win their last game. Yeah, look, I'm with you on that. I think he's already won it. But if assuming they win on Sunday, you win this league by 3 games. Come on,
Yeah.
Dusty May gets a nice consolation prize. See you later. That's it. I mean, there's no credible argument. Michigan State was picked fifth, so it
Right.
wasn't like this was expected. They weren't expected to win it. Forget win it by 3 games if that's how it ends up. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
They
No,
do, and they do it. They do it without a clear cut, all league or even second team all league choice.
maybe not even third league, but maybe
Well,
they'll probably have to put Jason there as third team, right? I
I do
mean,
think
somebody's got.
Jace's close is, even though the stats aren't necessarily going to support it, the seasonal stats, um, he might be he might have battled himself. If he has a good game against Michigan, he just might have done it. But
Yeah.
I don't think he's definitely not going to be on the first team. And I think second team might end up being a stretch. But just look at that. They're winning. They're not just winning, they're lapping the field, and they're doing it with a completely unconventional style
Yeah.
in terms
It's been,
of the balance and the depth. So yeah, I mean, I want to just flush this game. They won it. It's over. It was unpleasant for too much of it to watch, but they won, which is what great teams do. And now we get to spend a minute, just thinking about, and we've touched on a lot of the important points here already, but what this means. I mean, to go get an 11th Big Ten title, to do it when, quite frankly, too much of your own fan base was talking about Izzo being quote unquote washed. Guess again. And you'd like to think that people would learn something from it, but I know that's never true.
well,
So we'll just have to, just like Christ said about the poor, they will always, the Pollyannas will always be with us.
right.
But it's uh, it's a hell of a season. It's been a
Yeah.
hell of a season. I think it's been a ton of fun watching this because, as we've talked about many times, this team, as much as any I can think of in his tenure, just kind of embodies what this program has always said it's about. And they
Yeah.
seem to really enjoy playing with each other. They play hard. They play a style that we all recognize and embrace. And you just can't, you could not have asked for a better Big Ten season and a better season as a whole to this point than what we've gotten. So
Yeah.
I just hats off to him, hats off to his players, the rest of the coaching staff, the support staff, the athletic department, everybody.
Yeah. This is the most Izzo team of all Izzo teams.
I think so.
And I mean, of any of his teams, because he's not relying on any one dominant player. I mean, you could argue Jace, but not really even him. And
Well, it's different
and the fact
now
that,
versus the season.
yeah, but
Now
also,
you could say yes, he's the guy, but it wasn't that way.
yeah. But even now, I don't, you're not expecting to go out and score 25, 30 points. I mean, it's not
That's
like you're
true. That's
right.
true.
And so not, it's the most Izzo team ever. The team had been, you know, average for the last few years. It felt like
Average by
the
Michigan State
by
standards.
Michigan State standards, yeah, they're not competitive for the Big Ten championship. They're not even in the mix, with like 6 games left.
One
And
second, 1 second weekend run in 4 tries. Yeah.
yeah, and it just felt like, and the team when you're some on the court, like you said, they didn't look like Michigan State. They didn't rebound. They didn't a lot of things you're expecting from Michigan State. They
Didn't
weren't doing, and
run,
so yeah, so
didn't
now you've
run,
gotten back to
didn't
where
rebound. Yeah.
get back to where they were, and that's why it feels so good. And they're just low expectations, and not low, but like fifth in the Big Ten is not really high. So all those things add up to make it a really fun season, and then to win as easily as they have, and also just go into your rival's house and to kick things off and pound them, and then knock them out of the race. I mean, you really can't get much better than that. And now you get to have a victory lap, hopefully on Sunday, and just have a fun time and just
Oh,
pound them into oblivion. That'd be the
let's
goal.
let's not lose sight of the fact that it was repeated ad nauseum. Before they went to California, they were 9-0, right?
Yeah,
As everybody, well, this is where it starts. And then they go out to the West Coast and they happen to lose 2 games. Then they win
yeah.
one. Then they lose at home to Indiana. And everybody starts.
Ten
Oh,
and
oh,
three.
look at the
Yeah,
next 5 games. This is going to be a white, this is where it ends. You know, and what do we see? We see a team just run through that in decisive, I'll use that word, decisive fashion.
yeah. And many on the road, like in
Yeah,
really tough places, right?
half
Yeah, I
of these
mean,
6 games.
yeah.
And yeah, at Maryland, at Michigan, at Illinois. Those are, you know, Michigan's but the other two clearly in the upper half of venues that
Well,
Michigan
Michigan's
State
a
has
tough
to
venue
play
when
in the
they're
league.
playing Michigan State. That's the only
Yeah,
time they show up and
right.
and get into it. Yeah. Yeah, so super impressive for Michigan State. We'll be back tomorrow, and we'll have our preview for Michigan game coming up on Sunday, where it's the last opportunity to watch them in the senior day for Michigan State as
Yeah.
Big Ten champions, and they will unfurl a banner. And unlike in Illinois, this banner is not going to get unfurled upside down. That's my
We
prediction.
can we
So,
can certainly have that expectation, right? Yeah, just I just one more time, just what a tremendous season it's been, and hopefully we got a lot more fun to witness and to have and experience as we
10
move
more?
through the next few weeks. Right. 10 more games.
10 more
10
games.
more
Let's do it.
games.
All right. So until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go green. All right. Okay. See how fast I can get through this. I think I'm getting a lot better at turning off the live stream. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody, on the live stream. We'll be back after the Michigan game for our last live stream until the Big Ten tournament. I don't know what we're going to do then. So we'll have to figure that out because that's going to be a little trickier. Because I think Michigan State's the first game on
Yep.
Friday,
That's correct.
and I'll be there. So it's going to be a delayed. Although even Sunday's going to be delayed because I'm going to make sure that I
Yeah. Maybe we won't
watch
go
the
live.
senior celebration. We still
Yeah.
can go live. I mean, whatever. It doesn't. It's fine with me. All right. There we go. We're out.